Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, I'm Cornelius Oliva. Here I will present to you about validity analysis. This is the definitions of validity. Validity in testing and assessment has traditionally been understood to mean discovering whether a test measures accurately what it is intended in measure, or uncovering the appropriateness of a given test or any of its component of parts as measure of what it is proposed to measure. The importance of validity. Validity is especially important for all of the decisions that teachers regularly make about their students. Teachers certainly want to base their admissions, placement, achievement, and diagnostic decision on tests are actually testing what they claim to test. Adopting, developing, and adapting tests for such decision is difficult enough without having to worry about whether the test is measuring the wrong student characteristics, abilities, proficiencies, and so on. In all cases, after ensuring that a test is practical and reliable, teachers should consider its validity. Validity must also be carefully examined. Test validity is defined here as the degree to which a test measures what it claims or purports to be measuring. An importance of the importance of item planning. The process of developing a test, like the one described above, good planning can aid in creating a sound test as well as building a strong argument for the content validity of the test. There are three strategies for investigating the validity of the test. The first is content validity. The second is construct validity or psychological construct. The third is criterion-related validity. Content validity strategies are applicable for analyzing the validity of CRTS because these two strategies do not depend on the magnitude of the variance in the scores. This content validity is also can be used to analyze NRTS. To investigate the content validity, the testers must decide whether the test is a representative sample of the context or of whatever the test was designed to measure. This content validation process may take many forms depending on the particular language situation and style, but the goal should always be to establish an argument that the test is a representative sample of the content that the test claims to measure. This is the strategy for established content validity. This example is taken from the procedure of the problem in adopting, developing, or adapting a Tagalog listening comprehension proficiency test. The first, to decide what test should be designed to measure, we need to know what it will be actually be claiming to measure. The second, the testers then want to talk to their teaching college to get their idea on the components of Tagalog listening proficiency. The third, assuming that the testers and their teaching college reach a consensus on what they want to test. The fourth, they would like to outline and organize the different types of items that they have to identify as important and decide how many of each they want to end up with on the final version of the test. The fifth, the test developers should also write out item specification, if at all possible, for each of the testing objectives that they have collectively identified as components. The sixth, clear item specification can help to make item much more consistent and also more valid in the sense of that in the end, they have enough items left so each testing objective can be adequately represented on the test. This strategy will be valid if the expert validity can agree with the item that we have. There are some procedures to establish the expert validation. This example is taken from the validity of Tagalog listening proficiency test. The first, the tester should ensure that the experts are really expert and that at least to a degree the experts share the kinds of professional viewpoints that the testers and their college have. It means that you need to choose the expert that really expert and you need to know about the expert. The second, the testers must recognize the judgment of the quality of individual item may not be absolutely clear cut or black white. It means that the tester need to know first the object of the test. The third, the test developers may want to provide the expert with some short rating scale. Testers might have a need for each item to be judged on a scale 1 to 5 that represent a continuum from bad item to good item. The example of the judgment in this table below. This is the example of the table that we can use in the expert validity. A group of testers need even more information and therefore decide to have three 1 to 5 cells for each item, one for the form of the item, a second for a content, and a third for match to the overall goals of the course. This is the example of the importance of item planning in content validity. This example is taken from the test that used to measure the English reading ability in the engineering student. The first is planning involves working out the blueprint for what to include in the test and approximately what proportion. The second, test developer should be very careful about planning the test objective and specifying the types and proportions of items that will appear. The third, to develop items for test design to measure non-native speakers in the engineering English reading and listening abilities. The student needs to set out the test for his purpose because discovered that nobody had any idea what the components of engineering English reading ability might be. The fourth, after consulting with engineering professors and examining the literature on English for a specific purpose, they decide to test as broad a spectrum of item types as we could, and in the process discovered that our perspective as linguistics were quite different from those of the engineering professors. The fifth, as a result, it found that two distinguished of categories of items, one that they labeled linguistic factors and other that they called engineering factors. The net result are the develop of the task and the items of item plan become part of the argument for the validity of the test. The next is construct validity. Construct validity, or we can say psychological construct, is an attribute, proficiency, ability, or skill defined in psychological theories. One of the examples of psychological construct is love. Actually, we can analyze love and the feels of people. This construct validity is used to measure psychological construct. Contract validation strategies are applicable for analyzing the magnitude of the variance in test score. It can be analyzed for NRTLs. The construct validity strategies are appropriate for investigating NRTLs and CRTLs. The easiest way to understand initially are there are two ways to understand about construct validity. The first is the differential group and intervention type of studies. The differential group studies are designed to compare. It is called differential group studies because in conducting such study, the tester is trying to show the differences between one group that obviously has the construct measured and another that clearly does not have it. Intervention studies are similar to differential group studies, but conducted with only one group of the student. This is the example of the construct validity in differential group studies. The example is taken from the engineering English testing project and it will be described above. The three engineering English reading tests were analyzed and revised to form a single three-passage test with 20 each item for each passage and 60 items altogether. The next step was to establish to the validity of new 60-item reading text. The third, the necessary argument for the test validity carefully planning with engineering professor and defining various theoretical categories of item types. The fourth, to administer the test and find out how well the testers had measured what the task they were assessing. The ending step was a differential group experiment was set up to address the validity question both at the total test score level and the individual item type level. The sixth, the subject of this study was all students. Differential group study were graduated students and were studying either at UCLA or at Zhongshan University in the People's Republic of China. Okay, this figure is show that in this study the tester divides the group into four. The description will show the figure H1. The figure shows that there are four groups in the study. The groups are American engineers, American TESOL or TEFL, Chinese engineers, Chinese TESOL or TEFL, and they were 29 students in each group. After the test, the reliability were investigated was 80 for the targeted foreign student. The descriptive qualitative will be shown at the table A1 above. The American engineer scores highest with a mean of 52 out of 60, and Chinese non-engineering TEFL scored with lowest with a mean of 2738. In addition, all engineers together had a mean 4374. There be all scoring in the TESOL or TEFL student who had a combined mean of 3909. The construct validity of the test was supported by the fact of the Chinese engineering also outscored their non-engineering countrymen with mean of 39 I'm sorry 3697 and 2738 respectively. This is the data analysis of the test. Table A2 show that the type of analysis that derive from the result of an ANOVA, in this case, omega squared analysis, is a way of estimating the percent of variance among scores in the ANOVA design that is attributable of each factor's input. The next is the national factors in the study apparently accounted for about 49% of the variance in score, while the major factor explained about 12% of that variance. The data will show at the table A3. From the validity point of view, the interaction between major and nationality factors, major X nationality in this study, did not contribute significantly to the score variance, so it was ignored. The residual in the table indicates that 39% of the variance among scores was not accounted for by major or nationality. Hence, 39% of the variance can only be considered random until further study can identify more systematic source. This is consider the analysis of the engineering English reading test that is shown in the table A4. Observe that person scores are provided in the body of the table for each of the group labeled across the top and for each of the item types labeled in the left column. Okay, this is the number and the percent. Notice also that some item types appear to have been easier than others, and that in general the linguistic items appear to be easier than the engineering items for all groups involved in this validity study. The second studies in construct validities is intervention studies. Intervention studies are similar to differential group studies, but conducted with only one group of the student. The steps of doing the studies are: the first, we could administer the test at the beginning of a course for students studying English for engineering reading, then administer the test at the end of the course. The third, if they perform much better on the second administration than on the first, we have created an argument for the concept validity of the test. The fourth, this strategy is often the one that makes the most sense in classroom teaching situation and is particularly suited to criterion reference testing, where the purpose is to assess learning. The fifth, testers can accumulate the validity information they need in process of gathering item analysis data. Sixth, using this study in the support of the construct validity of CRT turns out to be quite a natural process. 7. A problem could arise if the student all skip the class constantly or if the teacher taught general grammar instead of engineering reading. Okay, in my opinion, this intervention studies is actually used in the classroom activities like in Indonesia because if the student skip the classes, they cannot understand what the material given. Okay, the next validity is criterion related validity. This validity is the special strategy for NRTS. Criterion related validity is the setting up an experimental also, but in here one group of students taking two tests in test that is being validated and another criterion measure which is already well-established measure of the contract involved. The criterion-related validity does not lend itself to investigating the validity of CRTS because it is based on correlational analysis. The result of criterion-related validity study for CRT would be difficult, if not impossible, to interpret. That's why this validity does not recommend for CRTS, but it's highly recommended for RTS. Criterion-related validity, which depends on test score variance, is suitable primarily for RTS, so this validity is covered in a section of its own, followed by a discussion of a naturally related issue, the matter of setting standards or cut point on a test. Okay, the example of this validity is twofold. One of the examples of a criterion measures. This test can be used to analyze the knowledge of a student. A criterion a correlational coefficient or validity coefficient in this context is to indicate a very strong relationship between the two sets of the score. The coefficient of determination is the square value of a correlation coefficient that can be directly interpreted as the percentage of overlap between the two measures. One is the new test and the other the well-accepted criterion measure. Concurrent validity is criterion-related validity but indicates that both measures were administered at about the same time. The example is TOEFL. Predictive validity is also a variant of criterion-related validity, but this time the two sets of numbers are collected at different times. In fact, for productive validity, the purpose of the test should logically be predictive. Okay, this table is show that restriction of range and energy validity. This table is presented about a number of sets of testing statistics. The result is systematically arranged from the group with the widest range of talent at the top to narrower and narrower range of ability as one moves down the table. These differences depend almost entirely on differences in the range of talent among the samples. Okay, I think that's all. Thanks for your attention. I'm sorry if I have one more mistakes. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.